Very good!
Sakura Wars is a game I didn't expect to play so soon, because you see, I am a man that likes to do things in order. I went through the weirdness of The Witcher 1 and 2 when 3 released instead of going right for it, just so I could see the evolution of the series, so I could check it out, you know? And given Sakura Wars is kind of a legendary affair for Sega, being one of the few things that truly propped up the Saturn and Dreamcast in Japan while getting anime and stage plays and lots of adaptations and all of that good stuff, you'd imagine I'd start with the French translation of the first game. Maybe I could have waited a little bit so I could play the fan translation of the second game, and then would check out 3 and 4 in Japanese to see if I could handle it. If not that, I would at least play 5, which was officially translated to English before I jumped into Sakura Wars 2019. So why, you might ask, I skipped to this one? The answer actually has nothing to do with the game. It's because this is the last game that I want to play on my PS4 before I shove it into a closet forever, so I just wanna get to it. It's for my own convenience. I just wanna finish it and then I wanna put it in a closet for the rest of my life. Sorry about the boring reason for that. But my personal stuff that you probably don't care about aside, what is Sakura Wars? Basically, it is a soft reboot of the steampunk meets mecha meets dating sim Sakura Wars franchise, which started in 1996 and has been going strong. It has been going to this day, though it was essentially frozen in an ice cube until Sega decided to reboot it and release the game in Japan in 2019 and everywhere else in 2020. It takes place in an alternate steampunk history where, instead of the world fighting the world wars, demons showed up one day instead, causing massive chaos. You'd think people would fight back using bullets, but nah, in true Japanese fashion, they decided to use giant, spirit-powered robots, and who could argue with that? The real feat of technological innovation here though is that this game has working mirrors. Every single mirror and reflective surface in the game works, and they don't even have ray tracing to help them. Meanwhile, here in 2023, there are still AAA games without working mirrors. I recently played the Dead Space remake and it has no working mirrors. Damn, Japan was truly ahead of their time. Back on track though, if you fast forward a little bit after the original Demon Wars, then the original Sakura Wars game begins. But if you fast forward even longer, plus 10 years, that's when the reboot takes place. 10 years after the Battle of Tokyo, a battle so destructive it took the entire country's effort to rebuild the city after it. It follows the story of Seijiro Kamiyama, a former Navy officer who gets reassigned as the captain of the Flower Division of the Imperial Combat Review. I hope I'm pronouncing review correctly, I'm sorry if I'm not, that's just not a word that I say very often. But the Imperial Combat Review are essentially a theater troupe that moonlights as the saviors of Japan, destroyers of demons, and they are currently in a rough spot, given that their plays are really bad, that they have no money, and even on the demon destroying side, the Shanghai Review are actually the ones that are currently protecting Tokyo. So it's up to Kamiyama to restore the troop to its former glory and stop whatever evil plot is brewing in the background. If that sounds like the game is setting you up for an RPG adventure, it does kind of sound like that, but Sakura Wars is actually a way stranger thing than at first glance. The opening certainly had me fooled, filled with grandiose plays and exciting battle scenes, and then that start screen, damn, what a good job of making a great first impression. I could barely keep myself, I just wanted to start and get into it. It's a great first impression, but then the actual game starts and what you get is something quite different. Like I said, I never played the old Sakura Wars games, but from what I read online, they were very story-focused games, and the new one follows this tradition, and I don't know how different or similar it is to the other games in the series, but this one is basically a slice-of-life visual novel where you walk around the same place talking with NPCs for 90% of the runtime. It is absolutely hilarious how much content there is in this demon-destroying adventure that has nothing to do with destroying demons. Instead, it is much more about its characters, with the focus being on its 5 leading ladies. Sakura, the main character's childhood friend who fights using a katana and always dreamt of joining the Flower Division since she was saved as a child by the heroine of the pre-reboot series, who's, by the way, also named Sakura. And the next one on the list is Hatsuho, a fiery tomboy shrine maiden who uses a giant hammer and chooses violence every time she wakes up, which is why she is best girl. And then we have Clarice, a graceful lady mage who fights using books and writes fanfiction like the nerd she is. And then there's Asami, a young, very serious ninja girl who really likes snacks. And last but not least we got Anastasia, a cold yet passionate Greek actress of renown who shows up to teach the other girls a thing or two so their plays do not suck so much. There is, of course, a great extended cast beyond these 5, mostly consisting of attractive women and one best bro/rival. If you know anime, you know the deal. The vast majority of the game, which is what you're going to see on the footage here, consists of the main character hanging out around the theater, going on extended slice-of-life sequences with the other characters, while occasionally hints of a plot start appearing in the background. Eventually, the plot threads from the background jump into the foreground as a very serious crisis approaches, and the chapter climaxes with a 10 to 15 minute dungeon run and a short victory epilogue after that. Then, the chapter is wrapped up and it's on to the next one. Did I mention each chapter can take about 3 to 4 hours to finish? When I said it was hilarious how little fighting there actually is in the game, that was not a joke. It is funny, but that was a fact. Sakura Wars is more like a 3D visual novel than anything else. And just like a visual novel, there are choices. In this game, they are called LIPs, which is an acronym for Live and Interactive Picture System. No, this is not actually in the game, they don't explain what it stands for in the game, probably because that's an outdated term now that the game is all 3D and stuff, but as for what it actually is in the game, it's just a dialogue wheel with only 3 choices that you must choose within a limited amount of time. There are more interesting variations like the analog lips, in which you must choose the intensity of how you want to say your dialogue lines, and also timed tasks in which you must complete a certain task within a limited amount of time. The game does love to throw curveballs at you using it though. There are plenty of creative uses of analog lips and having to adjust the intensity as necessary, and it's not always the best decision to complete a task in its given time, so you actually have to take each situation as they come to you. The game also loves to frame its characters in a first-person view, especially during some fancy scenes where they walk together with the protagonist while the background moves because, you know, they really are just moving in 3D, just to really hammer in its origins as a more humble visual novel, as well as to show how every visual novel could look if they had a bigger budget behind them. Now, this is the part where things get complicated, because what it is trying to do is all fine and dandy, it is not inherently bad or anything. However, it did not work very well for me because you see, if I see some giant robots blasting everything up in the opening, then I expect some meaty conflict in the plot. It doesn't mean you can't have moments where the characters rest and we get to learn more about them, but Sakura Wars is almost all about the resting. It is almost all about the slice of life. And I don't really dig this style of slice of life. I know what you're thinking. If you know me, you're probably thinking you don't like slice of life? You? The guy who loves the Boku no Natsuyasumi series? The Japan-only series that is basically nothing but slice of life? And yeah, really, I don't usually dig it, but you have to understand that not every slice of life is cut from the same cloth. Sakura Wars might look like a slice of life, but it's actually more of a comedy show really. A comedy show with jokes that are not all that original, nor do they land particularly often. It doesn't help that it just loves to take a page from harem anime, and just like those kinds of anime, a lot of the character interactions are characters almost saying that they want to date the protagonist, but never crossing the line, and the hero being incredibly dense throughout the entire thing. Only instead of seeing this gag a couple of times in a 24-minute episode, you instead get a lot of that throughout a 20-hour game. Because the relationships just can't change or evolve until the protag-man selects a love interest in the last 5 minutes of the game, the entire thing gets to be painfully repetitive. The side events just keep spinning their wheels for 20 hours, going so fast they might as well be a circular saw at this point. Each chapter also simply does not have enough content to justify their length. The game is set up as a TV show, even having a coming up next segment at the end of each chapter and an intermission during it like it's just an episode of good old television, and I'm not gonna lie, I love that shit. Problem is, each chapter is not 24 minutes long, it's not even an hour long, they are up to 4 hours long, but they are written like they were TV shows, so you end up with incredibly simple episodic plots stretched to their absolute limits. The structure of each chapter does not help. You usually get a main objective and a lot of optional events, but the game pokes you in the side so much about getting to see every event, and there's even a gameplay advantage to seeing every event, so off you go, completing a task, then stopping because your Steam-powered smartphone, yes, we'll circle back to that in a bit, but your Steam-powered smartphone is now alerting you that there's 10 or so optional events that you have to check out before going to the next objective. So off you go, before you complete the objective, to see a bunch of random events that at best might contain an actually funny gag, and then you go to complete the main objective after all of those, only for them to spawn another 10 or so irrelevant, unfunny, time-wasting optional events that you gotta check out before the next main objective again. It even does that annoying thing where something important and time-sensitive happens, but then immediately after the scene you gotta stop and check out all of the side events before you actually go do the next thing, because you don't know if they will still be there once you finish the main objective. Okay, so the side content is not great, but what about the main conflict of the plot, the demon invasion? Even if there's little of it, is the little we get at least good? The answer is no. I mean, I love the idea of it. The main girls plus the captain get to pilot color-coded robots as they fight against people like this guy who has a bunny ear hoodie as he does shady shit every other week. It's basically Power Rangers, but gotta be honest, I really dig this Power Rangers / tokusatsu designs that are so goofy they somehow wrap back up into being badass. But once again, the writing fails to deliver anything interesting out of it. The villains are evil because they are evil, and the good guys are good because they are good, and that's the end. And make no mistake, a classic good versus evil story could totally work. But there's just not enough meat in the bones of these characters. The evil characters are not full of charisma or absolutely despicable enough to make them fun to watch or hate, and the good guys, well. And honestly, this is the point in which I have to admit that I might have wasted your time by explaining all that stuff about the plot structure and how it is really bad, because make no mistake, the structure is not the best, but in reality, the main problem behind Sakura Wars is actually very simple. The writing is just really fucking bad. If it was better, everything would have been more tolerable. Hell, if the characters were more interesting and concise, then spending 90% of the game talking to them would be an incredibly pleasant experience. But they're not. Allow me to give you an example in Clarice. In the first chapter of the game, she's a total bitch. The theater is running into financial trouble since they suck and she has no faith in it or in the team's demon fighting abilities, so she just stays there acting like a giant black hole of negativity. Fast forward to the second chapter, the main conflict of the chapter is that she saves the lives of the protagonist and of a child using magical wind powers, because as it turns out, she has magical wind powers. And then immediately after that, she has an angsty breakdown about it. Why? Well, because her family used the powers to do bad shit, and so she said about the powers. And all I could do was sit in front of the television and say, wait, that's it? You just saved 2 innocent lives using the power in a way that was not destructive at all, and you're angsty because said power could only be used for destructive purposes? Like, how does this work? It makes no sense, and I get it's more of an emotional issue than a logical one, but come on, that's all the reasoning you get? There was no inciting incident that led you to fear the powers? No particularly nasty example of your family's history that led to conflict with a victim of their family's powers seeking revenge? Did you not witness any of your family members killing someone at some point in your life and you're like, oh no, I don't want anything to do with that? I don't know, man, I'm just spitballing random ideas here, but you got 4 hours to build a plot around this character here, and that's the best you can do? And then after a nice speech and fighting the boss of the chapter, she gets better, and in the next chapter she's now a shy, bookwormy fanfic writer basically. Some people would call that character development, but considering how much she changed from chapter to chapter compared to how little she actually encountered and experienced, I would rather call it character schizophrenia. And while she's the absolute worst example in the game, every character suffers from the same problems to different degrees. Out of character moments and half-baked motivations basically. The most stable characters are Azumi, who gets a decent enough backstory, though her chapter has other glaring problems with continuity considering the main conflict of it kind of just disappears from the rest of the plot, and Hatsuho, who has to share her chapter with Sakura and who gets no half-baked motivations because she has no backstory trauma to deal with. Considering the light-hearted tone of the plot, you'd imagine they would try to make most of the characters like her, since she fits this sort of story perfectly. The villain's motivations, like I said, are very flat. We are never given a reason for the demons to be bad, they don't even get a simple motivation like greed or pride, and the reveals of the true nature of some of them are so abrupt that they are done in like 20 seconds, and I had to guess what actually happened through strong implications rather than any actual explanation of the events that unfolded. The plot also has characters pull out whatever power they need out of their ass when the time is right, so I suppose I don't need to tell you that of course, there is zero sense of tension at all times. When it comes to lighthearted stories where you know the heroes are going to win, there is still some fun trying to figure out just how exactly are they going to win, but even that fun gets blasted to pieces when the writers are just randomly going to come up with new powers whenever necessary, so you might as well just give up and try to enjoy the ride, I guess. There is, of course, one big exception where it makes sense for a character to not have access to a power and then get access to said power, and there's also a sick-ass gameplay battle to accompany it in what is essentially the peak of the game for me, but that only happens once, unfortunately. It is, however, a good excuse for us to finally stop talking about the plot before I go insane, and let's start digging into the gameplay instead. Do not, however, let the bad plot or the promise of good gameplay distract you from the fact that Sakura Wars has working mirrors. Yes, it still has working mirrors. God, I love working mirrors. The gameplay in Sakura Wars is extremely simple. It's a real-time hack and slash with weak attacks and strong attacks, and your combos are all based on using the weak attack a certain number of times before pressing the strong attack button. It's an ubiquitous system at this point, and the simplest way to allow the player to use different finishers depending on the situation. You can also jump, which is useful because this game does include platforming, and you do need a way to deal with the aerial enemies, and you can also collect power-ups that slowly fills your special attack bar that allows you to unleash a different special attack depending on the character. You can also dodge, and if you dodge at the last second, you go into slow motion. If an enemy is about to die and you enter slow motion, you can also cut them in half using the heavy attack button, which makes no real difference as far as I could tell, but it looks real good. My only complaint is that you attack using the circle button. The weak attack is the circle button, which confused the hell out of me and made me wonder, why though? It's always square, right? I'm not going crazy, right? Why did they switch the button this time? To make matters worse, the special attack button is square, which meant I fired off my special attack accidentally a lot. And speaking of the platforming, there is some platforming to do during dungeons, which includes wall running at certain predefined places, and there's some fun ideas here like a tournament arc, because yes, while everything else is happening here, there is also an ongoing tournament arc which of course gets hijacked by the bad guy in 15 seconds, because of course it does, before everyone kind of forgets about it and just continues fighting anyway. You don't immediately fight against the other teams though, instead you have to compete in some Dynasty Warriors inspired arena to see who manages to kill the largest amount of fake demons first. It's a very fun event, and the hypest fight in the entire game takes place during it, but it also only happens a few times in the main game when it's of use to the plot. And that's the thing with Sakura Wars. What comes to mind in order to make a comparison are old school games, because in old school games it wasn't uncommon for the plot to be an excuse for the gameplay to happen, but here the script is flipped, and instead gameplay is in service to the plot. Almost every level has a character that has their special attack locked until the plot demands it. Or if they don't have it locked, then at the very least, the weakness of the boss of the dungeon will be their special attack, because this is their moment to shine. There's also the tournament battle gimmick to give it a sports event feel to some of the battles in order to shake them up, but only when it's joined together with the plot. And I understand why they would want to tie the plot close together to the gameplay and create these moments in order to shake things up, because the actual minute-to-minute gameplay of Sakura Wars is very, very bland and paint by numbers, and look, it's bland like rice crackers. Usually when you make a hack and slash like this, you at least try to differentiate it from the others by adding a gimmick that only your game has. And Sakura Wars kind of has one in the form of a trust bar that slowly fills up as you fight alongside the girls and gives you a bonus in attack and defense, and you can upgrade the starting level of the bar by hanging out with them, which is the incentive to complete every optional event that I mentioned earlier. But honestly, I didn't notice that much of a difference, and in practice it might as well not exist. Enemies and playable characters also throw out numbers when they get hit to indicate damage, but in reality, they don't have much use since the game has no leveling up system, no equipment, basically no RPG mechanics at all, which makes me wonder if they kinda wanted to do something a little bit more complex, if they had something a little bit more complex planned. But as it stands right now, it certainly feels like the game is missing something. Look, just to be clear, the system is not offensive or bad at all. It works. It really works. It is very solid. But the biggest problem is that there's this glimpse of something great here. There is alternative platforming paths in some dungeons, and some even have layouts made specifically to match a certain character's movement skills. Every character also have their own move and utility, but you can only bring one of them with you in each dungeon, and you don't even get to choose unless you use the replay function, because in the main story your partner is almost always chosen once again by the plot. But I can easily imagine a version of this game where you could switch between most characters at will, with each of them having more specialized movement and combat skills to allow you to find different ways to counter each enemies. The developers had the right idea, I just wonder if they didn't have the time or resources to execute it. So yeah, to me personally at least, Sakura Wars is disappointing. I can't really pretend it was anything else. I don't take any pleasure in talking shit about a game. I really wish I could have loved it. It looked like something that I would have really enjoyed it when I first looked at it, but I just couldn't find anything about the gameplay and the story. But if there's something I can praise about this game, is that it has 5 reflective mirrors in a row. Like, holy shit, man, look at that. Technology is amazing. Oh yeah, and I also really love the art style. Sakura Wars has style in spades, from the opening to the title screen to the character design and their giant robots and the world itself. I'm just going to go and say it outright that I'm biased here because I am biased towards anime style works that take place during the Taisho era. I just absolutely love the juxtaposition of the older, more traditional Japanese buildings standing side to side with modern buildings that are often done with more Western sensibilities in mind. And Sakura Wars brings that modernity into overdrive by being set in an alternate history where essentially televisions and holograms and giant robots exist powered by steam and spirit. But mostly steam. Yes, that's right, steam and spirit. But let's not get too much into that. Things are not wildly changed since those technologies are not available to the general public. Not everything is available to the general public, and the smartphone that the main character has is only a receiver, but damn, that's still ridiculously advanced for the era. I also wouldn't be surprised if the developers went to Atlus for a little bit of advice and they got some notes from the UI designers of Persona 5, because damn, just look at how smooth the loading screen for walking between areas is. It's just too damn good. Another strong point for the game are the mech designs. I will admit that I prefer the older ones compared to the ones introduced in this game, because they still looked a bit like a head on legs, but the more abstract sci-fi double sensor in the front really helped sell this as an actual robotic design. The new ones are cool, but are slightly goofier in that they just look like a knight's helmet on legs. But they still look pretty distinct, and I love how each country gets their own distinct designs based on that you can immediately identify which country it came from in-game based on their designs. And let's be honest, where else are you going to find a game with the balls to get a bright pink mech front and center? And then there's one final point that I want to hit before we're done here, though it is partially not about the aesthetics of sorts. You're going to understand when I explain what it is. There's a game mechanic that I didn't talk about until now called I don't know how to pronounce it, but it's basically a first-person adventure game view where you point and click around a character, and it is meant to simulate a very intimate moment between the protagonist and one of the girls, and by proxy, a very intimate moment between the girls and the player. You basically just bumble through them, I just bumble through them, choosing every option until you find the path forward. There is not a lot of room for improvisation, but there is this. Tell me, when was the last time you saw an unironic wall of light behind a character in Japanese media, like this wall of little glittering lights? Maybe it's closer than I think, but I cannot remember seeing an example of this in the last couple of decades that wasn't a deliberate parody or joke about shoujo media. It's played here completely straight without a hint of irony, and it's when I think back to these moments that I realize what I like about Sakura Wars, that which is hidden behind all of the veritable pile of problems that cover the game. It's got a sense of genuine earnestness and nostalgia for the good old days of 90s anime. And this entire affair is pretty funny because the original Sakura Wars was also meant to be a bit of a nostalgic throwback to the Taisho era, even though there's almost zero chance anyone alive in the 90s with first-hand experience of it would own a Sega Saturn of all things. I think I might be wrong, I don't have a good sense of time, but it is a nostalgic throwback to a romanticized version of an era that I don't think its developers ever participated on, though I might be wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. I honestly don't even know what else to say to this fact, it's just a neat little fact, except that maybe this is how movies about the 80s are going to feel like when we are in 2040, I think. But when this finally dawned on me, this is also when I realized that I had just played a very niche game. Usually when I play a niche game, it is only superficially weird, and I think most people could have a good time with it if they gave it a chance. Or maybe it is niche because it has broad appeal but it had a really bad marketing campaign. But nah, Sakura Wars is a genuinely niche product. It is made for dorky tokusatsu fans who like harem anime from the 90s and don't care if the plot takes a hit if it means that they get to hang out with their waifus. Though I have to be brutally honest once again and say that while I'm not a tokusatsu fanatic on any level, I still watched a few Kamen Rider seasons and every single one of them had better writing than this game. I know that it is very cruel to dunk on this game right now when we're trying to not dunk too hard on it, but I just don't want Toku to get a bad name as well. It's not badly written just because it is tokusatsu, it's just kind of a badly written game. I'm sorry. In any case, shit's clearly not meant for me, though I also haven't played the older games, so it's entirely possible that maybe it actually is for me and it just turns out that I'm not missing anything here and the older ones are simply better written and this new one sucks, and boy, that should be awkward to the chance that I'm giving this new one right now. But honestly, there is a lot of potential here, and I do believe if the developers were given one more shot, they could make something fantastic. It's just a shame that that chance is only going to come about 10 years from now, when nobody who made this game will still be working at Sega, since they just really buried this franchise and smashed the head of the corpse with a shovel for good measure with a gacha game that nobody liked. Yep. That's just how it goes. That's just how it is in this bitch of an earth. Well, I got a PS4 that I have to shove into a closet somewhere, so I gotta go right now, but thanks for watching to the very end. Thank you very much for listening to this bullshit to the very end. Thank you. Well, I really gotta go now. See you guys later. Wait, no, I forgot, you can actually play Koi Koi in this game. Damn, I completely forgot about that until now. Okay, Game of the Year, 10 out of 10.
まずまずですね。いい差です。負けません、負けませんよ。いい差です。わかりました。そんな、乾杯です。 それじゃまた遊びましょうね。